Hi everyone, it's Duchess. When you think of Final Fantasy, I doubt the words unpopular or hidden gem come to mind. In fact, it's usually the opposite. The series is hailed as one of the greatest in gaming history, with titles like Final Fantasy VI, VII, IX, and even IV getting constant praise and recognition. But how many of us have actually played through Final Fantasy V? I'm willing to bet a lot of you now just said no. That's exactly why today, I want to talk about what makes Final Fantasy V such a special and unique entry in the series, and why you should give it a shot. Some time ago, I picked up a complete in-box copy of Final Fantasy V for the Super Famicom. It was one of those impulse buys, the kind of vintage find that just feels too cool to pass up. When this game first came out, it hadn't even been released in the US, so unless you imported it, the Super Famicom was the only way to experience it. Of course, I don't know Japanese, so there wasn't much I could do when I bought this thing a few months back, besides mash buttons and hope for the best. But even then, something about it immediately caught my eye. Just from the title screen alone, the music, the visuals, the whole vibe, I could tell there was something special here. I couldn't really explain it at the time, but Final Fantasy V left this quiet little mark in the back of my head. Months later, I randomly found the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster collection at Best Buy for a really good price. I picked it up on the spot. I figured it was finally time to try out some of the older titles, especially the ones I had always heard about but never got around to playing. But with so many options, I wanted to make sure I started with the right one. I did some digging, and by digging I mean asking Grok what Final Fantasy game would match best with me based on the ones I had already played. I've played a lot of the newer titles and even some older ones that were already part of the Pixel collection, so I wasn't exactly coming in blind. To my surprise, it suggested Final Fantasy V, and honestly, I was not disappointed. The story of Final Fantasy V opens with something simple yet strangely powerful. The wind has stopped. That alone already feels eerie, like nature itself is holding its breath. From there, you're quickly introduced to 4 mysterious crystals that are tied to the balance of the world. Pretty standard JRPG stuff at a glance. You play as Bartz, a traveler who gets swept up in a much bigger adventure after witnessing a meteor crash and helping an old man with amnesia. It's not long before you and a small party of strangers turned friends are working together to protect the crystals from an unknown evil. What sounds like a small journey grows into something massive, and even though the game doesn't start with a tragic world-ending bang, it builds that tension beautifully over time. The entire world of Final Fantasy V has this really warm, classic fantasy feel to it. Castles, pirates, airships, magical forests. It's all very medieval with just enough magic tech to keep it interesting. The colors are bright and earthy, never too overwhelming, but always giving you enough to immerse you. You can feel the breeze off the ocean towns, the weight of the stone walls and the castles, the mystery of the ruins, all without the game ever saying too much. The pixel art is some of the cleanest I've seen from that era. On both the Super Famicom and Pixel Remaster, the art is expressive without being flashy, and the character sprites actually have personality to them. Whether it's Lenna's graceful stance or Galuf's grumpy little animations, you can tell who they are just by how they move. And then there's the soundtrack. Uematsu struck gold on this one, as usual. Seriously, the music in Final Fantasy V is just as important as any of the plot points. The moment you hear the main theme, you know what kind of adventure you're in for. Hopeful, emotional, a little whimsical. It perfectly sets the tone. Then you've got bangers like the boss fight themes that make you want to throw yourself into battle with full energy. It's not just the action tracks that stand out, the quiet songs, the ones that play in the overworld or during key story moments, carry this bittersweet feeling, like even in all the heroics, something fragile is at stake. That blend of courage and sadness in the music mirrors the tone of the story really well. One of the strangest themes, well, story themes that is, in Final Fantasy V, and honestly one that caught me off guard, is the push and pull between duty and freedom. You feel it right away in the way the characters are written, especially with Bartz. Bartz starts out as this laid-back wanderer, someone who travels because he wants to, not because he has to. There's something really refreshing about that in a JRPG protagonist. He's not chasing a prophecy or out for revenge, he's just doing his thing. But then he meets Lenna, a princess on a mission to check on the Wind Crystal, and suddenly his free-spirited journey starts shifting towards responsibility. The wild part? He chooses it. No one's forcing him. He sees that something's wrong in the world, and even though he could walk away, he doesn't. Then you've got Lenna herself, who's basically the opposite of Bartz in the beginning. She's been raised in duty. Everything she does is for the sake of her kingdom, her father, the crystals. But even she has to question it sometimes, like when her devotions puts her in harm's way, or when she's faced with truths that make her wonder if everything she's been told is right. Her growth comes from realizing that duty doesn't mean losing yourself. You can still feel and question and be human in the process. Galuf's story hits even harder in that theme. He's a warrior from another world, literally, and he came to this one because of duty. But the memory loss complicates that. At first, he's just a funny old man helping out, but once he remembers who he is and what he's fighting for, it's like his whole demeanor shifts. He becomes serious, focused, and makes one of the most heartbreaking sacrifices in the game because of his duty. And yet, it never feels like he loses himself either. His sense of humor and warmth remains until the very end. Even Faris, a pirate raised outside the rules of royalty, has to come to terms with her identity and what it means to suddenly have obligations she never asked for. She straddles both sides of the theme. She represents freedom, but she doesn't run away from duty once it finds her. She chooses to protect what matters, and that choice gives the theme even more weight. What makes Final Fantasy V special is that it doesn't frame duty and freedom as enemies. Instead, it shows that real strength comes from finding a balance, doing the right thing because you want to, not just because someone told you to. Also, I really want to take a moment to talk about Lenna. Out of all the characters in Final Fantasy V, she's the one who really stood out to me, and for a very specific reason. Final Fantasy as a series has a pretty solid track record when it comes to writing compelling female characters. What I love about Lenna is that she doesn't have to give up her gentleness, her grace, or her more traditionally feminine traits in order to be taken seriously. She's kind, soft-spoken, and selfless, but none of that makes her weak. In fact, those traits are her strength. She puts herself in danger multiple times for the sake of others, speaks out when something feels wrong, and holds on to her sense of compassion even when the world is falling apart. And the best part? The game never treats her like she's lesser than the others. She's not just a support character or the one who's there to keep morale up. She fights alongside the party, she makes hard decisions, and she carries the weight of her duty as a princess with quiet resilience. It's refreshing to see a character who isn't trying to prove herself by rejecting who she is, but instead embraces it and leads with it. Lenna is a great reminder that strength comes in a lot of different forms, and sometimes the strongest thing you can be is yourself. One of the most standout features in Final Fantasy V, and something I definitely have to gush about, is the job system. This game gives you so much flexibility to build your party however you want. Want to make a knight who can also throw fireballs? Go for it. Want a dragoon who also sings? You can do that too. And believe it or not, the job system is actually one of the reasons why Final Fantasy V didn't come to the US for years. Square thought it was too complex for Western players back in the 90s. That's why it skipped a direct SNES release here and stayed locked to the Super Famicom unless you imported it or later got it through the Anthology collection. As for me, I was obsessed with the samurai class, the aesthetic, the flashy Zenonage move, everything about it was just cool. And when I pair that with Black Mage magic, mwah, there's something deeply satisfying about being able to slice through enemies with a katana and burn onto a crypt right after. Now, learning the best combinations of jobs and abilities was not a walk in the park. I really wanted to do it right, so I started out by following along with the official Nintendo Power Strategy Guide. And oh my gosh, that thing was practically useless. I mean, it looks cool and it gives you the vibe of the game, sure, but when it came to actual help for some of the harder boss fights, nope, forget it. It barely gave me anything beyond the basics. So I did what any desperate gamer would do. I hit the internet. But even that didn't make things much easier. You'd think a game with the Final Fantasy name will have tons of resources out there, but Final Fantasy V is still kind of a ghost in a lot of circles. It's hardly spoken about, and trying to find good strategies or ability combos felt like digging for treasure in a mostly empty mine. But hey, when you do find those gems, it feels amazing. Eventually I figured out combos that worked for me, but it took trial, error, and a whole lot of Googling to get there. To the 80s and 90s gamers who somehow pulled this off without guides or internet help, I don't know how you guys did it. Seriously, total respect. Now if you're thinking of giving Final Fantasy V a try for yourself, which I really hope you do, you might be wondering, what's the best way to actually play this game today? I played it through the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster collection, which gave me a much more streamlined experience. And honestly, I think it was the perfect starting point. It's clean, the menus are modernized, the visuals are updated in a way that still honors the original art style, and the music is beautifully rearranged without losing its original charm. Plus, if you're someone who doesn't have time for hours and hours of grinding, this version lets you adjust things like XP gain, which saved me so much time without cheapening the experience. That said, late game bosses still absolutely mopped the floor with me, XP boost or not, so don't expect a free ride. But if you're more of a purist or someone who really wants to soak in the original experience, there are definitely other options. There's the Super Famicom version, if you're okay with the fan translations or just want to appreciate it from a collector's standpoint. There's also the PlayStation Anthology version, which includes Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, though it's known for some sluggish load times. Then there's the Game Boy Advance version, which has a pretty solid translation and extra content, but the audio and color palette were notably compressed for the hardware. So really it comes down to what kind of experience you're looking for, something smooth and modern or something closer to the original. Either way, the heart of Final Fantasy V is strong no matter where you play it. So no, Final Fantasy V isn't the absolute best the series has to offer. It doesn't have the grand tragedy of Final Fantasy VI, the cinematic flair of 7, or the sweeping romance of 9. But even so, it quietly won my heart. There's something special about how Final Fantasy V balances lighthearted charm with genuine depth. The job system is addictive, the characters are endearing, and the story, while simple on the surface, carries themes that linger long after the credits roll. It doesn't try to be anything it's not, and that's what makes it so lovable. If you've overlooked this one like I did for so long, maybe give it a shot. You might find, like I did, that this unassuming little gem has a lot more to offer than meets the eye. And that's my take on it. If you're someone who loves exploring the depths of the gaming community, hit that subscribe button below and turn on notifications by clicking the bell icon. Also, make sure to join my Discord server where we chat about cozy games, share recommendations, and just vibe between uploads. The link's in the description. I'd love to see you there. See you guys later.
With cozy games, she lights up our days. From Stardew Fields to Genshin's lush ways. Join her in adventures in every play. Oh, Duchess